Listen, when we open up our Bibles to the book of Judges, we find the pages of Judges, some crazy stories. We see the heroic faith of Deborah and Jael. We see the faith of Gideon. We see the tragedy of Jephthah, whose twisted view of God literally cost him everything. And how in the heck Samson ever became a hero in children's books that we would see and hold up to this day is absolutely beyond me, because he's probably the most deplorable character in all of the Bible. The problem that I see is this. When we step into stories like this and other stories in the Old Testament, often when we tell the stories, we isolate them from the story, and we largely miss the point. When you come to the book of Judges, you see this phrase that shows up 4 times in the book, and it's a central thread that runs through as the theme of the book, and it says this: in those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. See, that's a statement that feels like it could be ripped right from today's headlines. We live in an age of self-discovery and self-empowerment. And in this age, we have these mantras that say, anything's possible, just believe in yourself. Live your truth. Manifest your destiny. You deserve to do what makes you happy. And all of these statements are subtle, but they all argue against the notion of answering to any higher authority in favor of you serving as the captain of your own destiny. After all, nobody knows you better than you. No one can advocate for you more than you, except that's not remotely true. See, I don't know about you, but I face many days where I'm overwhelmed by my emotions and things that I feel within that I can't even find the words to express, that I'm crying out with the psalmist, why are you overwhelmed and downcast within me, oh my soul? There are days where I'm very well aware of the visceral impact of all my feelings, but what I desperately need is a compass to point me to the fact of reality. I don't know me better than anyone. Can we get real for a second? Often, I'm my own worst enemy. I don't advocate for what's best for me when left to myself. No, I seek the path of least resistance. What's easy in the moment, which is often what is going to serve me worst in the long run. I choose comfort and compromise when what I need is courage. I think what's saddest at all in this day and age of all these self-help cries of liberation is they're really nothing more than orphan songs of lament. Because what we're saying when we cry out, you can do it all, just believe in yourself, is that we actually believe that we're alone in the world to fend for ourselves and nobody else is going to do it if you don't do it for yourself. But can I just say this, in the midst of your truth and my truth, can we just take a few minutes and acknowledge the truth this morning? Because truth is a person, and his name is Jesus, right? I am the way, the truth, and the life. So in the midst of my truth and your truth, let me tell you what the truth says. The truth says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And before you were born, I consecrated you. That word consecrate, it means to set apart, to choose for one's own, to make sacred. Do you know what it means? The truth says that you are completely known, and right where you are right now, you're completely wanted. Can I tell you what the truth says? The psalmist cries out and says, "O Lord, you have searched me and you have known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down, and you are acquainted with all of my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it all together." See, the truth says that the one who numbered the stars and counted them numbered the hairs on your head. The truth said that when you lead yourself into things that you don't want to do and you don't know why you keep doing the things you don't want to do, that the living word of God draws near like a surgeon's scalpel to cut between your actions and your motives. He reveals your heart so he can heal your heart. The truth says that while we exhaust ourselves in this age of Instagram filters because man looks at the outward appearance. God looks upon our hearts. And even when our hearts try to condemn us, He's greater than our hearts, and He knows everything. And He delights to lavish His love upon us, even as He rejoices over us with singing. The truth is this: whether you know it or not today, you are known and wanted and pursued. He lives every moment to intercede for you. He's always working all things out together for the good of those who love Him, so that we would share in His holiness. And so I want to start this morning saying this: there is absolutely no power in my truth or your truth or my version of what I believe is best, which conveniently serves what I want in the moment and often separates me from the heart work of transformation. There's no power in my truth. There's great power in being fully known and fully loved. There is great power in being fully wanted and fully pursued. There is great power in being fully chosen and fully forgiven. But in the days of Judges, they had no king. And so they did what was best in their own eyes. And it led to this tragic cycle that we're going to read again and again and again in the book of Judges. I call it the downward spiral of the Judges. And this is the way this spiral starts. In fact, I think we've got a picture of it. The spiral always starts in the place of peace. See, it's God's default position is to bless you. When God created humanity, the very first thing He did was He blessed us. It means to go from a high place down to a low place, to look at us, to lift our heads even while we're in the dirt, to look in our eyes, to delight in us, and to furnish us with everything we'd ever need. You need to know this today for you and whoever your enemy would be. God's posture toward humanity is to bless us. That's where He's standing. That's what He's doing. But unfortunately, the people were not willing to trust Him as their king. And so the people chose in the midst of God's blessing to rebel. The Bible has this phrase where it says the wages of sin is death. And when I used to hear that phrase, what I thought it meant was this: that God said, this is in bounds and this is out of bounds. And if you step out of bounds, that's going to tick me off so bad, I'm going to add these penalties. And by the way, the penalty I'm going to add is I'm going to kill you for it. You know, that's not what God is saying when He says the wages of sin is death. He's actually describing the nature of something. It's like saying poison is poisonous. It's like saying if you are out in a thunderstorm and you step out from under the umbrella, you're going to get drenched. If you step out into the highway where cars are streaming by as fast as they can, you're going to get hit and seriously hurt. The wages of sin is death. Poison is poisonous. It's the nature of sin. What sin always does is it thrills, and then it chills, and then it kills every time. It's what it does. And so the next step in the cycle is this: as the people rebel, there's nowhere else for them to go. The wages of sin is death, and so they fall into defeat. The way the defeat looks in the book of Judges is this: a foreign ruler comes in and leads them somewhere they don't want to go. Can I tell you that's the nature of what sin still does today? You were created to be with God. Augustine said our hearts are restless, and they will be restless until we find our rest in God. All of creation is crying out with every groaning within us to know God. That's natural. That's normal. But what sin is a foreign invader that comes in the human race to lead us somewhere we don't want to go. See, sin wants to lead us into slavery and addiction and isolation. And every time when we get in this place in Judges where the people rebel against God and they find themselves in defeat, every time, somebody say every time. Where God is standing when the people fail is with His arms wide open, ready in a moment to rescue them, but their stubborn will to live by their truth in what is right in their own eyes dies hard. And so the people stay in their mess. We read in Judges, they stay in their mess without once crying out to God. They stay in the place of living my truth for 8 years, 18 years, 20 years, 7 years, 18 years, and then 40 years. And in each one of these stories, finally, when they're sick and tired of being sick and tired, when they're sick and tired of where my truth leads them, they humble themselves and they cry out to God. And every time, the very next words in the story are this: and God came close to rescue. God raised up a deliverer. See, immediately, he didn't make them pay it off. He didn't make them sit in the dirt and feel bad. He didn't make them make it right. No, immediately when they cry out, God comes and leads them right back into his peace, because the posture of our Father is to bless you. Which shows us this in our life. Listen, every place you surrender lordship, every place you surrender your right to be in charge of your life, every place you surrender lordship, the Lord will draw near to steer your ship. But you can't have two captains. See, that's the definition of mutiny. There are too many people walking around today that are mad at God because they insisted to steer their lives according to their rules, and they crashed in the rocks, and now they're crying out and going, God, where are you? And I've got news for you. He's right on the ship, but you demanded to drive. And he's longing and he's waiting to lead you out into open waters, but first it means you have to relinquish control of the wheel of your will and your truth for the truth. So we come to the pages of Israel's first judge, Othniel. And what I want to look at this morning is this. I want to look at choosing courage in the face of complacency and compromise. The big idea I want to give us this morning is this. If we trust in our strength, we will fall into complacency or compromise, but God waits to fill us with courage. If we trust in our own strength, if we live by our own truth, if we walk as if we have no king, I promise you, we will end up in one of two places, complacency or compromise. But meanwhile, God is standing where God has always been standing, with his arms wide open, ready to fill us with what we need, which is courage. Now, I believe terms matter. So I want to define complacency and compromise really well for us. I believe complacency is a passive yielding to go along with the crowd, with no care toward the dangers or deficiencies that lie ahead. Complacency is an unaware and uninformed self-satisfaction. It's the loss of critical thinking. It's the lazy river at the water park, where you kick back and you put up your feet and you've checked out and you are going wherever the current leads. If you want to know what complacency looks like in everyday life, complacency is a disinterest in hearing warning or correction or redirection. It's saying, oh no, I only want the news that feels good to my ears. I only want you to tell me, only play the hits, God. Only tell me the things that feel comfy and feel good. I only want words to come my way that are self-empowering and tell me I'm on the right track. Lift me up and tell me that. But any words of correction or redirection, I'd really rather not. I just want to be Hakuna Matata, right? I'm just living my best life. Complacency is a passive yielding. But compromise is the active pursuit of something that delays, deflects, or dilutes God's desire for our lives. Compromise is polite rebellion. See what I mean by these terms when I say compromise is an active pursuit to delay what God wants. It's this. God has something for your life. God's calling you to something, and you know it, but you're distracted, and so you choose a detour. God's calling you to something, and you choose other priorities. But of course, we never say that. We don't say, oh God, I'm just not willing to follow you. We say this, I'm just too busy right now. I'm just in a busy season. By the way, newsflash, if you've been in a busy season for 4 years, it's not a season, it's your life. That's for somebody. But we say, I'm too busy. Let me tell you what we're saying when we say we're too busy. First of all, we're faulting God as if he hasn't given us enough time, when 24 hours is sufficient since the beginning of human history. So if we're too busy, it's not a God problem, it's a stewardship problem. But what we're saying is this. Every time I say, I'm too busy to take care of my health. It costs too much to eat right. I'm too busy to get to know my neighbors. I'm too busy to work on that thing that God told me to work on. What we're saying is this. I have the same time that everybody else in human history has ever had. I just don't have your priorities, God. The thing that you want for my life and the thing that I want for my life don't match up, and I'm actively pursuing the thing I want instead of the thing you want. I'm choosing to delay. And by the way, we won't say it's forever, right? Because it's a busy season. I'm going to obey just soon, but how many people know that delayed obedience is disobedience? We're delaying what God says. How does compromise look? Compromise is deflecting what God says. This is where we refuse to give our lives the attention that's needed to change, and so instead we change the conversation. God says, I want to work on this thing. We plug our ears. I'm not willing to hear that, but God, I want to talk about all these things. I want you to build all these things. So we still pray, but we just want to pray in this arena where we're willing to do the work, but we deflect in the places where God says we most need to follow him. We doing okay? All right, we're just getting started. Here we go. The last thing we do is we dilute. We want God and the pursuit of another treasure. Right? That's what it is to dilute. You're adding something to a pure substance. You are watering it down. God and money. I want God and success. I want God and acceptance. And that's why I call it polite rebellion, because none of us ever set out and say, God, I'm trying to reject you. It's just I want God and I want this other thing. But here's the problem. When you seek God and something else, it is never long before you're seeking God for something else. Let me say that again for somebody in the back. When you seek God and something else, God, I want this and that, it's never long before you're seeking God for something else. See, obeying God and your dream becomes, I'm going to obey God for my dream. God, I will follow the rules so you give me my prize. And when we don't see the thing that we wanted, we begin to cry out and resent God because we failed to see that we are chasing two treasures. It's the very definition of double-mindedness. See, you can't seek God for treasure. He is the treasure buried in the field that a man finds and sells everything he has to have. So can I just remind somebody in the room today, if you have Jesus, and you never get another material blessing in the days of your life, you never get another attaboy, pat on the back, another thing. If you have Jesus and you never get another blessing, you have Jesus. I am my beloved's, and he is mine forever. Nothing can separate me, neither height nor depth nor anything else in all of creation. No scheme of the enemy can ever separate me from the love of God in Christ Jesus, my Lord. I'm seated with him in heavenly places. Where I stand right now is a co-heir. And somebody, if you're not coming out of your seat right now, if that's not moving us, if today I could come and say, I'm going to award somebody $1 million and we'd all go nuts. But we're co-heirs with Jesus and we can sit on our hands in our seats in church and go, that's nice. Something has gone wrong with the way we see in our generation. If you got Jesus, you got the treasure. You're highly favored. You're with him forever. And by the way, the only reason you're not here, the only reason you're not yet absent from the body and present with the Lord is because he's called you to plead with all people, because he's got other sons and daughters that he wants home so they would have the same treasure that you have. But we're chasing so many other treasures. So much of our prayer life is, God, would you give me this? And God, would you let people like me? We don't recognize the compromise. See, Othniel was willing to stand up in his generation in two ways. First, Othniel was willing to stand out amidst the complacency of his generation. The book of Judges, it starts with the people being in the promised land. And that's a really big deal. Because if you remember at the beginning of the story, Genesis chapter 12, God comes to Abram and he tells him this. He's standing in Canaan. He's standing in the promised land with Abram, and he says, Abram, one day soon, I'm going to bring you back here. This land that I'm giving you today, I'm going to bring you back, and I'm going to raise you up as a mighty nation. You're going to be a city on a hill. You're going to be a lighthouse that will be lifted up so that all of the other nations that are crashing into the rocks can see the way back home. I'm going to raise you up here, and I'm going to do this. The promised land was the whole thing that Moses was trying to lead the people in the Exodus to. The promised land was the place where for 40 years they wandered because they weren't willing to trust God and enter. They gave way to fear. And finally, as Joshua came and led the people in, they started to get in the promised land. And now in Judges chapter 1, the people are standing with their feet in the promised land with a simple call. Take your inheritance. God said, I've given you the land, now go and take it. But 10 times in Judges chapter 1, one for almost every tribe represented, 10 times in Judges number 1, it says they failed to take hold of the inheritance God gave them. And over time, they became okay with it. Complacency. By the time we get to Judges chapter 2, this is what we read. The people served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, who had seen all the great work the Lord had done for Israel. And there arose another generation after them who did not know the Lord or the work he had done for Israel. Guys, when the parents tolerate incomplete obedience, the kids develop a taste for disobedience. They stopped intimately knowing and trusting God as their father. They lost the script of the story. They're in the very place where God said, this is it. I've got this plan that I'm going to bring hope to all of humanity. Here it is, what you're called to be right now. And they lost the script. They became okay to be in a place that was the promised land of all of these blessings, and all of their focus became on everything they could build for themselves in that land. And I want you to note the very next words. It says this, and so the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and they served the Baals. They abandoned the Lord, the God of their fathers, who brought them out of the land of Egypt, and they went after other gods. From among the gods of the peoples who were around them, they bowed down to them. See, in the ancient world, in Canaanite religion, it was a polytheistic culture. What that means is they served many different gods. And the gods they served, they had gods for everything. They had a god for the crops, a god for water, a god for safety, a god for fertility. And if you were a Canaanite at this time in the Promised Land, your life was this balance between trying to do something to appease one of the gods without angering another one, because they were very temperamental and very jealous and very childish gods. And so you had this balancing act. And here's the deal. They would come and give elaborate sacrifices to their gods, which included self-harm, sexual immorality, and even child sacrifice. I want you to understand, Canaanite religion was not about finding God. It was about fueling greed. The truth is, they wanted to be their own gods, so they chose to serve the gods who could give them what they wanted. The idea was, it's a trade, it's a transaction. If I give you what you demand, then you will give me what I desire. It was the first religious consumer culture. God, I'll sacrifice to you so that you keep my crops healthy. God, I'm going to worship you because I believe if I worship you, you're going to keep my bank account full. God, I'm going to come around because I believe you're going to make my business thrive and you're going to make me successful and important. And if I follow you, people are going to like me. Isn't it so great that we've learned from our mistakes and transgressions? The craziest picture you see of all, by the time we get to Judges chapter 2, is though God had told Abram that he was going to make his people, the Israelite, lights, a city on a hill, so all people could come and run from their destruction. In reality now, the Canaanites set up their worship, and guess where they chose to worship? At the highest place in the city. They built up high places to worship their fallen gods, and all people, including Israel, came to follow them. In the most ironic tragedy of all, the lights of the world went to bury their hope so they could grope around in the darkness. That was true of almost everyone in their generation, except for one. See, we go several years before this, before Joshua and Caleb and all the others died, when there were still a few of the elders who had seen the mighty works of God, before the people had completely rebelled. We go back and we read this picture of what had started to happen. And we read about Caleb. You remember Caleb? We came to the place where as the Israelites were coming into the land, Moses sent out spies. If you remember that, he sent 12 spies out into the land to check it out. And 10 of those spies came back and they were like, oh my gosh, the land is unbelievable. The grapes are the size of watermelons. Like the crops are abundant. It's huge fields. It's all the riches we could ever dream for. But the people are giants and they're going to kill us. Please don't make us go. 10 of the people cry out that. And 2, Caleb and Joshua say, no, listen, the land is everything they said, but our God promised us. He delivered us from slavery for this very reason. He said we're going to be lights of the world in that place. Now is the time. This is our call. Stand up. Be courageous. But the people wouldn't listen. They listened to the 10 and rejected the 2, and so God God told them that they would wander in the desert until the entire generation except Caleb and Joshua passed away. And the entire generation except Caleb and Joshua passed away. And Caleb and Joshua start going with the people in the promised land. And now we get to the end of Caleb's life. And all of a sudden, to his shock and to his horror, he watches before his own eyes history repeat itself. The people start getting in the promised land and they stop thinking about going after the thing that God said to be lights of the world. They become complacent with all the comforts of what's around them. And so Caleb issues a challenge. With his last dying breaths, he calls out and he says, I'm just hoping that there is somebody in this generation that's willing to stand up like me. I'm hoping there's somebody with courage, and I want to issue a call. And here's Caleb's call. It says, Caleb said, whoever attacks Kiriath Sefer and captures it, I will give him Aksa, my daughter, for a wife. And Othniel, son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother, captured it, and he gave him Aksa, his daughter, for a wife. Please don't miss this. Caleb is saying, listen, if there's anybody here willing to stand up and remember why we're here, if there's anybody here willing to be courageous, I'll give you my daughter in marriage because I want her marrying a man like that because I don't want my legacy dying here with me. I'm ready to look and see, is there anybody else that believes in God like I believe in God? I want my family's future hitched to that. And it says this man named Othniel stood up with courage among the complacent. See, here's the sad thing that happened. When they started to get in the promised land, they saw indeed the grapes were the size of watermelons and the crops were huge and the land was spacious. And sadly, instead of being a light for the rest of the world, they made their existence and even their religion about themselves. And they grew content to spend their life growing larger crops, building bigger barns, and fitting in with the comforts and the customs of people around them. Sound familiar? See, there's a scheme for complacency in our generation too. Sadly, as I share, I believe the greatest danger facing modern Christianity in America is us being bored to death. We are surrounded by an embarrassment of riches. We've been led into a promised land of endless distractions and delicacies, and for many of us, we've camped there and we've lost the script. You know, as I speak right now, around the world, there are people who will travel for miles just for the privilege of being able to walk into a room or a hut or an open field and worship with other believers. And I think about how often I take for granted the blessing of this. That we get to walk this way in family. And sometimes when it's raining outside, we're like, oh, I'm not going to go to church today. Right? Time change comes, we're like, I need that extra hour. And it's not condemnation, but gosh, it's a different worldview, isn't it? When I think about right now, there are people who are yearning for receiving the Bible in their own language. They're having to smuggle it into their country illegally under threat of death. And they're like, if I could just get the Word of God in my own language, I'd do anything. And then I wonder, how many days do I log hours in front of a screen and get to the end of the day and say, God, I just didn't have any time to let your Word breathe in me today. I think about the ways we tolerate unhealthy decisions that we know are wrong in our bodies, in our souls, in our spirits. Patterns we know miss God's mark for us, but since they're popular, we've stopped letting them convict us. My heart grieves when I hear the way some of us talk about our weight or our health or medications we have to take or the fact that we never get rest. And we just laugh and we joke, oh yeah, that's it, yeah, okay. Like, it's all funny. It's hilarious. The way we write off our own unwillingness to grow up in our faith. The number one command Jesus left for his disciples, for us, was that we would go and make disciples of all nations. And last week, my brother Andre, did you love Andre? Isn't Andre awesome? Andre came and said, you're either a goer or a sender or you're disobedient. But guys, in modern Christianity, we've lost the script and we've made it about a morality club of who's in and who's out. And I find myself wondering, where's the intentionality? Where's the confidence? Where's the passion that runs to encounter Jesus and to see other people encounter him, willing to spend our very lives for it? And I want you to understand this morning as you're hearing me, this isn't a guilt session about your walk. It's a confession of mine. See, I'm deeply aware of how I've allowed cultural norms to redefine what surrender and hunger for Jesus look like, so much so that if you just seek the normal things that are needed for your spiritual health, you seem like a crazy Jesus freak today. In the midst of a crowd of Christian consumerism that is bowing down at the high places of every other care in the world and losing the pure and simple devotion to the gospel, I've just got to ask the question, is there anybody else in the room with me that's done with it? Is there anybody else that would say, I'm not content anymore to waste away and to waste time and to make excuses and aim for a boring, low, safe, comfortable life? Is there anybody with me that's willing to say, I'm willing to stand out in my generation and say, zeal for my Father's house consumes me. I'm willing to sell it all and follow Jesus. He's the treasure. He doesn't owe me another treasure. He's already the treasure. I don't need to wait to worship. Where is it time for us to actually get serious about spending ourselves for the gospel and the privilege of what it is to know Jesus? Where is it time in the age of complacency and apathy and negativity to put on courage? Now listen, if that rises up something in you, as it's rising up something in me, I'm going to give us an opportunity in just a minute. But first we have to look at one other scheme. See, Caleb chose to stand out against the complacency of his culture. But Othniel was willing to stand up against the schemes that compromised his generation. See, there's one more time we see Othniel in the story. Now, up till now, Othniel's just been a courageous and valiant son. He was somebody that stood up and said, I'm willing to be courageous. And he ran and he risked his life to stand and do different, to do what Caleb said, and he got the bride. The problem was everybody else sat in their chairs and they didn't care. They just continued on, living their way. Nothing changed. So Caleb dies. And Joshua dies. And you have young Othniel still there willing to follow, but nobody else seems to care. And the next words we read in the story is this. It says, and the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. They forgot the Lord their God, and they served the Baals and the Asheroth. Therefore the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he sold them into the hand of Cushan-Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia. And the people of Israel served Cushan-Rishathaim 8 years. But when the people of Israel cried out to the Lord raised up a deliverer for the people of Israel who saved them, Othniel, son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother. The Spirit of the Lord was upon him, and he judged Israel. He ruled Israel. He led Israel is what that word means. And he went to war. And the Lord gave Cushan-Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia, into his hand, and his hand prevailed over Cushan-Rishathaim, and the land had rest for 40 years. Then Othniel, son of Kenaz, died. Now, first of all, how cool is the name Cushan-Rishathaim, right? That's a cool name. We just don't name ourselves well enough these days. I want you to recognize what's happening here. The people have forgotten God again. They've settled out in complacency, and here's the deal. If you choose complacency, it's not long before you end up in full-out compromise. If you choose complacency, I'm just going to live my truth. I'm just not going to push against things. I'm just not going to say the thing that needs to be said. Everybody live their own truth. Everybody stay in your own bubble. Let's all just be happy. That often becomes a Christian mantra. I want to tell you that's not only complacency, it also is quickly becoming compromise. And so they find themselves bowing down and serving Baal and Asherah. Let me tell you about those two gods for a minute. Baal's deal was self-harm and human sacrifice. That's the way you came to worship Baal. You cut yourself and cause yourself harm, and you sacrifice your children or innocent scapegoats within your people group to the gods to make them happy. Asherah's deal was temple prostitution, sexual sin in the name of God. I want you to understand that Satan's scheme is always to attack the image of God in you and others. He wants to attack your ability to see and love God and others in yourself. And he wants to do it by perverting every expression of love. He wants to do it to distort your identity and to mute the image of God in you because he can't kill it. What's saddest to me in our day and age is some of the people that are loudest about living your own truth are some of the ones that I watch most bound up in slavery, most bound up in misery. And here's the reason why. I want you to understand this. If you don't know the God of the story, you'll get sucked into worshiping the gods of the story around you without even knowing it. If you don't know the God of the story, if you don't understand where this is going, here's what happens. Today you hear all kinds of people going, I'm independent and I'm just living my own truth. And what they don't understand is there's a spirit of the age that is at work. You didn't self-actualize yourself here. You didn't just decide one day, I think I'll be a person. That's not the way this works. There are bigger spiritual realities around you that are guiding everything that's happening. And if you know it or not, there's a spiritual war and there's a scheme and assignment against our age. And in the midst of that, listen, the people who most say, I'm just walking by my own autonomy, I'm in charge, I'm living my own truth, they are the people that are most bowing down and worshiping the gods of this age, and they don't even know it. See, we have an enemy, and he has a scheme against the generations before him. For Israel, his scheme was the high places of the Baal and the Asherah. For us, listen, there's a lot, but I'm going to tell you right now briefly, I see at least 4 schemes against our generation right now. The schemes I see are this: autonomy, ego obsession, offense, and outrage. There's a scheme in our generation of autonomy. What do I mean? I live my own life. I speak my own truth. You have no right to speak to me what I should do. I deserve to do what makes me happy. Me, me, me. I lead my ship. Our culture has a deep distrust of authority and anyone who doesn't agree with me. We quickly cancel, or we call a bigot. The saddest part is we don't see that that's nothing more than self-isolation of the blind, leading the blind into the same bitter captivity. Second scheme I see against us is a scheme of ego obsession. We live in the age of the influencer. Come on, in this day and age, everybody wants to be significant. Everybody wants a platform. Everybody wants a following. Everybody wants to be famous. We consume ourselves every day with how many likes did I get? How many shares did I get? Who's saying what about me? Who's talking about me? We idolize ego in our culture. I deserve to do what makes me feel good. And in this idolizing of ego, we need our attention engaged all the time because we're just so important that we need to be entertained. I mean, I watch young kids today watching TikTok like they're a Roman emperor kicking back like, feed me grapes, entertain me, I need something now. And by the way, parents, I watch parents do the same thing just a lot more awkwardly because we're not as good with technology. We need to be entertained all the time because the most important thing is me. Tell you, in this ego obsession, I believe that most of our off-the-charts mental health struggles, you're seeing right now, and you could trace this, our mental health struggles have spiked, and they spiked right around the same time of the iPhone and social media. So I want to let you know that when you see these spikes, most of them are directly tied to the importance that we've attached to how everyone else sees me. Let me say that again so we get it. Because we say the church doesn't talk enough about mental health. Let me talk about mental health. Most of our mental health struggles are directly tied to our obsession with how everyone else in the world sees me. Most of our anxiety, our fear, our worry. Now here's the deal. They can become these behemoth things and then they become psychosomatic illnesses. So now many people have been caught up in this machine so long that it's actually hurting their body. You've heard my story about how God healed me. So if you think I'm throwing rocks at somebody else, no, I'm telling you my own struggles of where I've lived. I've lived this one out. You get so tied up in how everybody else sees you that it actually starts to affect your physical health. But praise God, we've got the healer. We live in an age of offense. It's the age of my rights. Right? That's what we hear everybody talk about today. It's my rights. And they don't have the right to do that. Nobody has the right to say that to you. We walk in deep suspicion of other people. We're always upset. We're dividing people across aisles and we're pointing the finger at someone. And can I just remind us, offense doesn't just happen to you. You have to take offense. Offense is an active decision. Offensive things are going to happen in the world. You're going to have trouble. The wages of sin is death. There's sin all over the world. There's more than enough offensive things happening. But listen, for you to get offended means that you chose to take offense. It's a decision that you make. And many of us fail to see the fact that offense is a spirit. Can I submit to us that every time we take offense, we're worshiping at an altar of self-righteousness and pride? I have so much more to say on this subject. In fact, so much that I have a blog that we're putting out tomorrow morning. Weekly, we try to give a blog that will go along with the message, and this blog is called The Last Scapegoat. It's about the way that we walk and often scapegoat one another, but that Jesus came as the final one, that we'd stop casting everyone else aside. And here's the deal. I'm a songwriter as well. Whenever I write a new song, I feel that song is the best song I've ever written, right? So let me just tell you, I just wrote this blog. It's the best blog I've ever written. But I want to tell you, I believe it's one of the most important ones for the conversation we're in today. So if you're at the place where you just said earlier, I'm sick and tired of the complacency, I need to know how to stand, tomorrow we're going to give some next steps directly of how to walk out of this culture of offense. But the final one is this. We've got a culture of outrage. See, offense never just stays personal, it becomes viral. That's what outrage is. It's viral offense. We live in the age of clickbait. Shocking and salacious sells. And if we're willing to be honest, all of us, we want to hear gossip, especially when it's somebody else at a high place doing wrong that needs to be called out. We need to scapegoat somebody so we feel better about ourselves. And I want you to understand this. Whenever we live in the way to gossip about somebody else or to scapegoat somebody else, we don't realize it, but we're bowing at the altar just offering up the next human sacrifice. Let me say that one again. Somebody's like, where's the happy message? Happiness is coming, friends. When we, as followers of the Most High God, who've been called as ministers of reconciliation, get caught up in the scheme of this age to talk about, point fingers at, make enemies of flesh and blood, gossip about, talk about stories where we weren't even in the room, share it on social media, laugh at other people's downfall, all we're doing at that moment is not worshiping the King. We're bowing at the altar of Baal, offering up the next human sacrifice. Here's somebody that's not worthy of your grace, God. Here's somebody that hasn't arrived where I have, and it is self-righteousness, and it is pride. Because if we lose sight of the God of the story, we will bow down to the gods of the story before us. Othniel saw the schemes against his generation, and the Bible says he went to war. Othniel went to war. Can I just remind us for a minute, our battle is not ever against flesh and blood. You will never meet a single enemy of flesh and blood. You're told that those who make themselves enemies against you, you're to bless and you're to pray for those who persecute you. Which leads me in our closing moments, to the greatest hope. Because if you remember, when we come to the Bible, the person in the story is never the central character. The entire scripture has always been about Jesus. So this story that's been about Othniel, really it's about Jesus. He's just a shadow of a greater king who's coming, because we don't live in the age where there's no king. And this is where I get excited. Anybody interested to know what the name Othniel means? Othniel means lion of God. By the way, anybody want to know where Othniel came from? He's the lion of God from the tribe of Judah. The lion of the tribe of Judah, a name given repeatedly to Jesus in the scriptures. Listen to me. We go in the Old Testament. Let me tell you the story we just told you. The lion of the tribe of Judah suddenly appears in the age of complacency. The lion of the tribe of Judah rose up among his brothers and risked his life to take the hand of his bride so together they could raise a different legacy upon the earth. The lion of the tribe of Judah came as a rescuer to an enslaved people who saw the assignment of compromise against them and went to war until it was torn down. He was an echo of one day that would soon come, when the lion of the tribe of Judah would rise up among his brothers and bleed and die to prepare his bride for a different legacy. And the rescuer who would come to an enslaved people who would call us to a new fight, a new war. See, I want to take you to the words of the real Othniel, Jesus, who stood on a high place, a city on a hill, in a sermon called the Sermon on the Mount, where he stood as the light of the world and said these words. You ready? This is about how we fight compromise. Anybody done with compromise in our culture? 3 people are done with compromise. Anybody else? I'm going to be an auctioneer up here. Is there anybody in the room that's done with compromise in our culture? So the million-dollar question is, how do we fight it? We've seen the way lots of Christians have fought it. Scapegoating, offense, finger-pointing, name-calling. Let me tell you what the true fire of God, the true Lion of Judah says. He says this, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. He makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain upon the just and the unjust. See, Jesus said this is what it means to be the light of the world in a city on a hill, that all people, by the way, speaking of people who set themselves up as your enemies, that they will see your good deeds and come to glorify your Father in heaven. Jesus came back as the city on the hill and said, I've torn down the Baals, I've torn down the Asherahs, I've raised up my people, I've got my bride, and I just want to know, is there anybody courageous who will stop losing the script in the promised land, who will stand up and choose to be courageous in the face of complacency, that'll stop drifting along? Is there anybody that'll rise up against compromise and rise up not to scapegoat and say, how dare they do that? But will lay down all of that pride and say, no, they need the same Savior that I need every single moment, and all I'm ever going to be is a lighthouse saying, you can come home too. You can come home too. See, I want you to understand when we come to the end of this story, we see the Lion of the tribe of Judah standing in our midst in the age of outrage and offense and ego obsession and autonomy. In an age where many people are walking by what's right in their own eyes, where our mantra is living my truth, the Lion of the tribe of Judah is in our midst. And he's ready to fill us with courage if only we'd let go of the wheel of complacency and compromise, which leaves us with the question, will you walk by what's right in your own eyes, or will you follow the King? Would you stand with me?